March 2026. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is dead. He governed Iran for 37 years. He outlasted 6 American presidents. He survived 1 assassination attempt, a revolution, a proxy war empire spanning 4 countries, and a nuclear standoff that consumed 3 decades of geopolitical energy. He did not survive Operation Epic Fury. In the 72 hours following the strikes of February 28, 2026, 3 American service members were killed in Kuwait. Tel Aviv was struck. Energy markets opened Monday morning with Brent crude above $95 a barrel and climbing. The Strait of Hormuz, the 21-mile choke point carrying 1/5 of the world's oil supply, was seeded with Iranian mines. And inside Tehran, the institution that has governed 88 million people since 1979 was no longer a government. It was a set of competing armed factions with ballistic missiles, theology, and nothing left to lose. This is not a story about a war that started on February 28th. This is a story about a war that was built piece by piece over 14 months. Through tariff threats, tanker seizures, carrier deployments, and a $100 million bomb contract signed the day before Valentine's Day, a war assembled in spreadsheets and procurement documents and anonymous Pentagon leaks before a single bomb fell. In the next 18 minutes, I will show you the exact sequence of decisions that made this war inevitable, and why the economic siege that was actually working was abandoned for a military campaign that may have no mechanism for success. Part 1. The siege before the war. To understand what happened on February 28th, you have to understand what was already happening on February 6th. That morning, 100 nautical miles west of Mumbai, the Indian Coast Guard interdicted 3 vessels. The Stellar Ruby, flagged in Iran, the Al Jafia, the Asphalt Star, all 3 U.S. sanctioned, all 3 carrying Iranian petroleum through the Shadow Fleet network that had kept Tehran's oil revenue alive despite years of American sanctions. India did not intercept these ships because it wanted to. India intercepted these ships because on January 13, 2026, President Trump posted 7 words on Truth Social that changed the economic calculation for every country that had been quietly doing business with Iran. Any country doing business with the Islamic Republic of Iran will pay a tariff of 25% on any and all business being done with the United States. The math was immediate and non-negotiable. India's total trade with Iran, $1.6 billion annually. India's total trade with the United States, $120 billion annually. You do not sacrifice the larger number to protect the smaller one, not when the larger number is 75 times bigger. Within 10 days, India did something that took Western analysts completely by surprise. It didn't just announce compliance, it liquidated a decade of strategic investment. India Ports Global Ltd., which had signed a 10-year contract worth $370 million to develop the Chabahar port on Iran's southeastern coast, resigned its board members en masse, took down its website, transferred all committed funds to Tehran before sanctions could freeze them, zeroed the budget allocation in the 2026 union budget for the first time in a decade. According to a government source cited by The Print, India has no choice but to exit the Chabahar port. This is not gradual policy adjustment. This is capitulation at emergency speed. A country abandoned a strategic asset it had spent a decade building, a port designed to give India a land corridor to Afghanistan and Central Asia bypassing Pakistan in less than a month. Because Trump's tariff threat was not hypothetical. It was already being enforced, and the reward was immediate. According to Reuters, India and the United States signed a trade deal on February 8th, 2 days after the tanker seizures, under which Washington lifted the 25% tariff in exchange for India's commitment to enforce sanctions and halt Russian oil imports. That transaction is the template for everything that followed. Demonstrate compliance, receive relief. The sequence is transactional, not ideological. Turkey was already allowing its 25-year gas supply contract with Iran to expire without renewal. The UAE, the largest buyer of Iranian fuel oil, was recalculating exposure to secondary sanctions. Malaysia, Singapore, Pakistan, each too dependent on U.S. market access to justify the smaller trade volume with Tehran. By mid-February 2026, Iran had 1 oil customer left at scale, China, and China was buying at discounts of $10 to $15 per barrel below market benchmarks. Iran's oil revenue was being eroded from both sides simultaneously, fewer buyers and lower prices from the 1 buyer that remained. The economic data confirmed terminal trajectory. Currency exchange rate, 1.47 million rials per dollar. Food price inflation, 58%. 7 million Iranians, food insecure. 3,600 killed in protest crackdown since January 8th. Capital flight by regime insiders. $400 million between December 2025 and January 2026. Senior IRGC members describing themselves as being on the verge of psychological collapse. These are not the numbers of a regime under pressure. These are the numbers of a regime in terminal decline. The siege was working. The only question was whether it would work fast enough. Part 2. the weapons that were already positioned. While the economic siege was compressing Tehran's options, a different kind of siege was being assembled in international waters. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group was already in the Arabian Sea, 500 miles from Iran's southern coast, 3 guided missile destroyers, F-35C Lightning II, Haritus on the flight deck, 120 sorties per day capability. Then, on February 13, 2026, the White House made it official. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the world's largest warship, displacing 100,000 tons, powered by 2 nuclear reactors, was being diverted from the Caribbean and sent directly to the Arabian Sea. No port call, no crew rest. A ship that had already been at sea for 8 months, whose sailors had been planning reunions with their families, was ordered into what everyone in that region understood was a war posture. 2 carriers, 280 combined sorties per day, 15 confirmed surface warships, and underwater, the detail that most analysts buried. According to Middle East Forum analysis, the USS Georgia had participated in Operation Midnight Hammer in June 2025, launching more than 30 Tomahawks at Isfahan. But the USS Georgia carries not 30 Tomahawk missiles. It carries 154. It fired 30. It had 124 remaining. And it is not alone. The U.S. Navy operates 4 Ohio-class SSGNs: USS Ohio, USS Florida, USS Michigan, USS Georgia. Each carries 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles. In September 2025, the Navy removed USS Ohio and USS Florida from the FY 2026 deactivation list. Submarines scheduled to be retired were kept operational specifically, in the analysis's words, to preserve this massive strike capacity for current contingencies. 4 submarines, 616 Tomahawks combined, approaching from depths Iran cannot track. Add 6 B-2 Spirit bombers at Diego Garcia, each carrying 2 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, the 30,000-pound bunker-busting bombs that represent the only weapon in the American inventory capable of penetrating hardened underground nuclear facilities. And, confirmed by Air and Space Forces magazine on February 9th, F-35A Lightning IIs crossing the Atlantic, landing at RAF Lakenheath, then observed moving east toward the Middle East on February 11th. F-35s go first. They clear the air defense layer. Then B-2s follow with the bunker busters. This is the exact sequence General Dan Kane described publicly after Midnight Hammer. B-2 bombers were led into hostile territory by both 4th and 5th generation fighters. The sequence was already assembling on February 11th. Then on February 12th, the U.S. Air Force awarded Boeing a sole source contract worth over $100 million. The stated purpose? To replenish the inventory of GBU-57s, expended during Operation Midnight Hammer. The contract document stated the acquisition was critically needed to restore operational readiness. Replacement delivery? January 2028. 23 months away. Whatever bombs existed on February 12th were all that existed for nearly 2 years. Iranian intelligence analysts read Defense News. They read the government contract posting. They now knew something they had not known on February 11th. American bunker buster inventory was depleted enough to trigger an emergency sole source contract. The window of constrained American capability was 23 months. Iran was building Pickaxe Mountain, its new deep underground facility with 30,000 psi ultra-high strength concrete, specifically engineered to exceed MOP penetration specifications. Every day that window remained open. On February 14th, the Reuters report landed. 2 anonymous senior Pentagon officials confirmed that the planning was more complex than Midnight Hammer, a sustained campaign targeting Iranian state and security facilities, not just nuclear infrastructure. The White House, asked to deny it, said 4 words: "All options are on the table." That is not a denial. That is a confirmation in diplomatic language. Part 3. Operation Epic Fury. What actually happened February 28th, 2026. The strike began underwater. Ohio-class SSGNs launched in excess of 400 Tomahawk cruise missiles at Iranian integrated air defense nodes, radar installations, and command and control infrastructure across western and central Iran. The missiles arrived before any Iranian air defense operator received an elevated alert order. This is the same sequencing from Midnight Hammer. Degrade the defensive layer before the primary strike package enters. The second wave changed the equation in a way Tehran had not adequately prepared for. Since June 2025, Iran had spent 8 months calibrating its Chinese-supplied YLC-8B anti-stealth radar systems against the B-2 Spirit's radar cross-section. The B-2 was a known quantity. Iran had 8 months of data. Then the B-21 Raiders came. The B-21 Raider is America's 6th-generation stealth bomber, declared operational in December 2023. Its stealth profile is different enough from the B-2 that existing countermeasures may not apply. Iran had never encountered it operationally, had never measured its radar signature, had never calibrated detection thresholds against it. The B-21 presented what military planners call a stealth reset, a weapon system the target has no baseline against. The B-21s penetrated Iranian airspace carrying GBU-57 MOPs. The double-tap technique, 2 bombs dropped sequentially on identical GPS coordinates, the second following the crater, created by the first to penetrate deeper, was employed at Pickaxe Mountain, at Fordo, and at the entrances to IRGC missile cities across the Zagros mountain range. But here's the problem no post-strike briefing will confirm publicly. Against Iran's 30,000 psi ultra-high strength concrete, MOP penetration depth drops catastrophically. The weapon was rated against 5,000 psi standard military grade concrete. 30,000 psi is 6 times stronger. The double tap technique against standard concrete delivers roughly 120 feet of combined penetration. Against Pickaxe Mountain's engineered concrete, at an estimated depth exceeding 260 feet underground, the math doesn't close. The facility may have survived. The thermal imaging from early February showing active ventilation heat from equipment running underground at Pickaxe Mountain represents the central strategic irony of the entire campaign. The one target that justified the buildup of 2 carriers, 4 submarines, 6 bombers, and 112 C-17 loads of logistics may have been the one target the available weapons could not reliably destroy. Carrier-based F-35Cs struck radar sites, SAM batteries, and communications relays. The target list Netanyahu delivered to Trump on February 12th, 73 sites, included IRGC Aerospace Force command nodes controlling the ballistic missile program, proxy coordination centers managing Hezbollah and Houthi logistics, and leadership compounds inside Tehran. One of those compounds was Khamenei's. Part 4. What Khamenei's death actually destroyed. Western analysis consistently misunderstands what Khamenei actually did inside the Islamic Republic's power structure. He did not micromanage. He arbitrated. The Islamic Republic was deliberately designed with competing power centers that cannot resolve disputes between themselves. The elected presidency, the IRGC, the Guardian Council, the Expediency Council, the regular armed forces, the clerical establishment. Khamenei was the single node through which factional conflicts were settled without open internal war. Remove him, and you do not have Iran without a supreme leader. You have a set of heavily armed factional power centers with irreconcilable interests, no arbitration mechanism, and every incentive to secure resources before anyone else does. The IRGC is not a military organization that answers to civilian leadership in any functionally meaningful sense. It controls approximately 40% of Iran's GDP through its economic empire. It runs its own intelligence network. It manages proxy forces across a